Well, good evening, everyone, those of you that I can see. I'm Becky Roloff. I'm president of St. Catherine University, and it is a true pleasure to welcome you here this evening. We begin our event tonight with honor and respect for the ancestral homes of the Dakota people who shared this sacred land with all of us. We, St. Catherine University and the Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet and their consociates, continue to have a deepening awareness of our complicity in the complex history of colonialism, genocide, and broken treaties. We commit to a journey of listening, learning, building relationships, and advocating for and with American Indian nations for a more just world for all. There is much to discuss tonight, so I will turn this over to Carrie Miller, and welcome, Carrie.
That was short, Becky. Wow, I wasn't ready for that. Beth, did you want to say something? I couldn't remember if that's, no, okay. Welcome everyone to the chapel of St. Kate's University in St. Paul. I am promising you a loud, bold, and bracing town hall about women in science. Can I get an amen on that? All right, little louder. All right. I'm Carrie Miller of Minnesota Public Radio. Thank you very much for coming tonight. And it's good to see so many students and alum and people from the neighborhood who just care about this. So thank you very much for responding to the invitation and taking some time out this evening. I will bet you know this. Most Americans and Europeans cannot name a living scientist. Now, I know that is not the case for this audience, but does that just blow your mind? Who can name a living scientist? Someone you admire? Yes, sir, yell it out. Yes, okay. Yeah, okay, that was an easy one. I'm giving you that one. How about some scientists who are not here on the stage? Yell some out, come on. Yes, way to go, Morgan. Thank you. Who else? I've got Dr. Meg Urey. Does anybody know? Yeah. She is a straight-talking astrophysicist at Yale who really speaks truth to power. And I've been reading about some of the things she has to say about women and science. So you will be hearing her name again tonight. We meet tonight amid some pretty concerning trends for women who work in science: biological research, physics, healthcare, chemical engineering, computer science, and more. Now, some of this is pandemic related, less time in labs, less time on research, and if you're a woman scientist with children, forget it. Maybe there are some women here who have experienced that. I see nods. In fact, I saw a nod that makes me, she's like, don't come over to me. I'm coming over to you. Why were you nodding like that?
Well, I have 3 kids and I run a lab.
All right. So tell me about the balance and the tension between that.
It's really tough.
What makes it difficult?
The time to be here, to work with students, and the time to be home to be with my kids.
Do you feel like sometimes the chips are kind of stacked against no matter which role you're trying to, yeah?
Yeah, definitely. You want to do both really well, and it's hard to do that.
Who else is somebody from the community who is in science? I talked to somebody earlier tonight. You're in Medtronic, but you don't have kids? Or you do?
No, I don't have any kids. No.
Is that something that you're concerned about? Having a family, having a career, balancing what she's talking about?
Isn't it everyone's, right? Like, I mean, I have a number of coworkers that are going on a maternity leave, and I'm like, oh God, how would I pull that off? Like, I have zero understanding of how I'd pull that off.
Does the company, you work for Medtronic, is the company supportive of that?
Yeah, super supportive of it, but I'm also like, I don't know, I'm a really like hyperactive person. So I'm like, I work a lot of hours and I just don't know if I'd be able to pull it off even with company support.
I want to go to our panelists here tonight. Is that something you hear, Anita, from students? Is it something that you hear from young women who have graduated? How does that resonate for you?
Oh, it totally resonates with me. I think I hear it from our students. One of the things that many people don't know about St. Kate's is that we have a lot of young women who are parents who are pursuing their education, sometimes full-time, sometimes part-time. We do have adult students along with our non-traditional population, and so that is certainly a juggle that a lot of students have concerns and have expressed. We also, with the beginning of COVID, have heard a lot from the faculty. As you've heard, it's challenging to really think about how do I give 100%, sometimes even how do I give 50% in my classroom, especially because in the middle of COVID, when we're thinking about healthcare and healthcare disparities and the results on some of our communities, the call for the work that we're doing to educate becomes even stronger. So that juggling is a real phenomenon that lots of us are experiencing.
Peace, you've been in your career for 3 years now, right? You're an alum of St. Kate's. You work for a company that manufactures lasers.
Correct.
So I'm curious about how, as you thought about getting into the field, you began to think about the balance that we've just heard about here and kind of where you're at on that right now.
I haven't given it a lot of thought, but I do have a couple coworkers, female coworkers, that have gone through the process of trying to keep up with work while also going on maternity leave or having to deal with things with kids. And I know it's going to be a challenge. It's not going to be easy to do both. And again, you want to be able to do both very, very well. So it's something I'm going to keep watching other colleagues and seeing how they handle it so I know how I can in the future.
Dr. Hawkins, I think, or Tav, if I may, all right? I think the challenge here is that these fields are still so male-dominated. And so there are not that many women still, I guess, at the top of the companies or at the table making the kinds of policies that would alleviate what we're hearing about and what we're talking about. Would you reflect on that for a minute?
I think that it's really difficult in a male-dominated field when, you know, you're thinking about, if I take maternity leave, like, does my project get given to somebody else? Or how late can I stay tonight? I mean, even just for me to come here today, I had to go pick up my kid from school, and then I had to bring her home and pick up dinner on the way. So, right, and then I come here. So it's just that extra step that we do as women, with especially women with kids, you know, and trying to run a household as well. So my kid washed test tubes. My kid as a baby was under my bench as I did experiments. So we get through it, but yeah, it has that extra lift required.
We're going to swap out that mic while I talk about this. The larger concern on what's happening or not happening is that in the field overall, there are still so few women, as noted here, who are making the kind of policies and changing the kind of internal culture. When Donna Strickland won the Nobel Prize for Physics in 2019, does anybody know how many women have ever won the Nobel Prize for Physics? Anybody want to have a guess on that?
She was number 3.
She was number 3, exactly. She said, I do live in a world of men, so seeing mostly men win this prize doesn't really surprise me. In fact, more than 95% of all of the Nobel Prizes given in science have been given to men. In 2012, Yale published a study that found that professors at 6 major research institutions, this really floored me, were significantly more willing to offer a male scientist a job and pay him more. And by the way, that was male and female professors. So when they got an application, they got a resume, the young man who was looking for the job, many times more likely to get that job and get higher pay than the young woman. So that's cultural conditioning that says this is what a scientist looks like. Of all the physics professors in America, something like 14% are women. And Dr. Hawkins told me she is number 50 out of 100 women of color, Black women who are physicists, have their PhDs in physics. Did you know that when you set out in the field?
No, I just love the subject.
Would it have mattered?
At one point in time, it did matter. When I finished my undergrad, I really had to pause and think about whether or not I wanted to continue and be in those spaces where I would be the only one a lot of times. But it was just in me. I love the subject. I could not do it, right? And so everybody in science has scars, but you do it because you love it, you're passionate about it.
What do you mean by that, everybody in science has scars?
Meaning that, I don't know, somebody didn't like your work, somebody didn't pick you for the team to work on this project. So, there's lots of things that go on in science. I really feel like the whole atmosphere of, going through the PhD, getting an undergrad, getting a master's, getting a PhD, right? It's like people get weeded out along the process. And so you're seeing all of these scientists here who have gone through that and have existed through a PhD. Then you do a postdoc. Do you continue to do a second postdoc? Then you become a professor, right? Everybody who starts on the professor trail does not end with full professor. Not everybody gets tenure. So there's lots of places to be weeded out. A kid, a sick parent, all of these things could take you out of the game, even though you might be really good at your science. And that's what I mean by that passion has to really drive you when you hit those bumps.
I'm looking for somebody in the audience who is majoring in science, who is, thinking about those scars and what that might mean for your career. And I am landing right here, next to Kariana. Perfect. Have you thought about that?
I have. It's definitely something that is always in the back of my mind. Every class, every time I wake up and writing an assignment or doing a research project, it's like, do I belong here is the question.
Do I belong here? So what would make the difference to the answer to that?
Well, I currently work at the Minnesota Center for Diversity and Economics, and we have a lovely program called CFEM. And basically, the point of CFEM is to tell students like myself that you do belong here. So for me, it's continuing that work and sharing with people who look like me and have the same fears that, yes, this is the place you belong if you want it.
So how important is mentoring? Because all three of our guests, I think, are going to say being able to see it helps you imagine it and helps you say, yes, I belong. So how much would that matter, or does that matter?
I think it definitely does. I mean, mentorship for anyone in any field is super important for any questions you may have along the way. But seeing people who look like you is just especially important. It's kind of like as a kid, you see, oh, this basketball player, oh, he can do it, so I can, kind of thing.
Anita, would you reflect on that for a minute?
Absolutely. That mentoring piece is critically important, and I think for BIPOC students in particular, it's important for you to see someone who looks like you, for you to aspire to. One of the things that we know from the research, I'm thinking about Albert Bandura in modeling, is that being able to mimic, to see that person that reflects who you are is critically important. But I think for BIPOC students as well, having someone who can understand some of the scar-making processes, I'm going to borrow that phrase, the microaggressions, the implicit bias, the times where you sit and question, is this happening to me because of my gender? Is this happening to me because of my race? And being able to talk with a mentor who reflects your gender, who reflects your ethnicity, gives you the space to open up in ways that you may not do so with a majority faculty. Many of us, when we have experiences, spend a lot of time thinking about, did this really happen and why? And the psychological energy that becomes exerted in trying to come up with that explanation takes you away from the energy and the time that you need to really endeavor in your studies. So that mentoring piece is really critically important.
You know, one of the things I've wondered about that is how much an institution, I don't just mean a university, but also a company, an organized institution, wants to acknowledge, wants to hear it, because if you don't know it, then it isn't a problem. If you don't know it, though, you're going to lose key talent. You're not going to know what you don't know. I think you know what I mean. What would you say about that?
Well, one of the things that I think has happened historically in the country and in the last, probably since the 90s, is we've really become much more aware of issues around race and equity, and we've done a fabulous job of increasing access. But what we failed to do after we've granted access is to make sure that the climate is welcoming, that those individuals have that sense of belonging, attachment, that they're able to see themselves, that they're able to see progression, forward movement in their occupation. So, and I think institutions, whether it's higher ed, anywhere in the workplace, has to be critically honest with themselves. We've opened the door, and we have to move past the token counting to really say, what are the types of experiences that we are providing for this individual? Are we confronting implicit bias when it occurs? Is this a place where microaggressions can be called out, challenged, and corrected? So until we move to that action piece of climate, of acceptance, of belonging, of mentoring, of togetherness, access just isn't enough.
I want to turn to a student behind me, Morgan. Is that something that first I'll ask you what you're majoring in.
I'm majoring in biochemistry.
Is that something that you give some thought to, you feel open enough to bring to someone's attention if you're experiencing it, and that you worry about once you leave the kind of protective confines of a university? It's a complex question. I know you can handle it.
Thank you. You know, it's so funny because I was just having a conversation with a friend, and unconsciously, I made the comment that I was like, I really want to be a good scientist. And it kind of made me pause because I realized that I didn't say I wanted to be a good female scientist. I said I wanted to be a good scientist. And that was the first time that I just unwittingly detached gender from my intellectual merit. And it made me think to being back in high school in a co-ed class. I was extremely intimidated because I was one of the only girls in my chemistry class or in my physics class. And so in the back of my mind was the fact that I was always female. And being at St. Kate's, everyone is, female. So for the most part, the students. And so when I'm in lab, I'm focused on being a good scientist, not a good female scientist. And it's such a liberating feeling. Like you have inherent confidence in yourself. And I feel like when you are, especially the age that we are, when you're in a male-dominated sector, that you tend to be a little bit self-deprecating more, or you tend to try and fit in with the men, or on the flip side, you try to be extremely strong so that your femininity doesn't get in the way of your science. And you don't have to do that here. But the funny thing is, I'm not afraid of, when I graduate and I go to a co-ed graduate school, of being intimidated, because I've gained the confidence here. Like, I've got the basis here. So it's invaluable. I love it.
Tav, would you say something about that? So one of the things that we're hearing from Morgan, This is an important experience. She's gotten the kind of confidence she needs. Does she know what she doesn't know about what's on the other side of the protective campus of St. Kate's?
Yes and no. You know, it's one of those things. Would you take this step if you knew, right? If you tell me, oh, we're just going to work out together. But if you tell me we're going to run a marathon, I'm going to not come meet you to exercise, right?
Yeah.
So, and also, I love, it's infectious, that enthusiasm, right? I was where she was, oh, so long ago. But, yeah, just yesterday, that's right. And you have to go into it open in that way and willing to enjoy and overcome all that there is out there. And don't get me wrong, guys have a similar side that women experience in, you know, STEM. So it's not always so smooth for them as well. But the one thing that I do feel that a women's institution empowers women with is to, like she said, take away all of those other things. It's just about me being a good scientist. And so once you can see yourself in that arena, you're ready to jump on in there and do your thing. So that's all you need.
Peace, you told me that you are one of 2 people of color at your company.
Women of color, but
Women
yes.
of color, right. So I guess I want to know how that means you think you show up in your coworkers' perspectives, and whether you spend some time thinking about that.
So sometimes it can be hard being one of the few women of color. I'm also the only Black woman at my company. And sometimes I don't always feel like I belong in the space, if that makes sense, because I'm not surrounded by people that look like me. And some of my experiences are different because of my race and because of my gender. So there are often times where I can question whether or not I belong in that space because I'm not being surrounded by people that look like me or have similar experiences.
So take me through what that sounds like in your own self-talk. You know, in your own mind, when you're questioning whether you truly belong. I mean, you were in essence recruited. You had an interview with the CEO. You did an internship and then you were invited to come back to be an employee. They wanted you. Tell me what the self-talk sounds like when you're asking yourself whether you truly belong.
I could be like in a big company meeting, for example, and I can be hearing the experiences that maybe like a white male has with his education or his knowledge and thinking, well, I have a different understanding of, or I have a different experience in what he's talking about.
Yeah.
But it's hard for me to see myself being in the same position that he is in. Maybe he's farther ahead, maybe 10 or years of experience or so. And it's hard for me to be like, okay, well, I can get to that point when I don't see anyone else that looks like me at that point. Mm-hmm. And I know I am at the stage that I'm currently at. I am educated and I do have experience, and I do have the knowledge set to be able to get to that. But imposter syndrome can sometimes make it so that you don't feel like you actually belong in a space or that you actually earned your spot. And that is something I can struggle with at times. So
Anita, what do you hear in that?
The reality that a lot of people face, and we spend some time talking about the imposter phenomenon on campus. One of the things that it reminds me of, and Morgan, thank you for that powerful statement of testimony that you gave. But one of the things that it reminds me of is the importance of being armored up and the tax of being armored up. One of the things that you probably experience peace when you go in is doing that self-talk of, I am here, I am competent, I can make it. And then you put on the armor of what happens if a particular incident occurs, or what happens if someone makes a statement to me. And that constant sort of need to be prepared for whatever may come, I think becomes really challenging. What I'm hoping that we do here at St. Kate's is provide the tools for students when they leave so that they can be armored, that they can give those positive affirmations, remind themselves of the confidence that they've been able to build, remind themselves of the really solid, rigorous education that they've experienced. But that imposter phenomenon is a real thing that many people experience.
You know, when I think about that armor, anybody that gets into a competitive field, particularly women, experience that. But I also think about how exhausting that is to constantly polish up the armor, to make sure that it's in place and in shape to be in that space. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think oftentimes, and I've experienced this myself, there are times when you forget to armor. That you become so comfortable that you feel like you've been accepted. And then suddenly a remark comes from someone that surprises you and you realize you're not armored. And so then the psychological energy of deconstructing that experience, of putting on your armor, of being really hypersensitive and somewhat hyper paranoid to your positionality makes it even more challenging and becomes even more exhausting.
Sir, you came here with a daughter tonight. I said I'd be back. Here I am. Is what you're hearing just in the first part of our conversation enlightening, surprising? How would you think about it?
I'd say both. It's enlightening. I'm a father, I'm a male, so I don't have the lived experience of a female, of a woman. But being a Black man here in Minnesota, I have had to navigate similar challenges that I hear the panel describing. And I'm hoping that I can glean and learn something here that's going to help me do all I can to prepare my daughter for what she's likely to experience and face, being a young woman of color who is very talented and gifted in math and science.
Do you feel like she's 13 now, she will enter a world, perhaps a scientific field, that is significantly different than what we're describing right now? Or do you fear progress won't come that fast?
Boy, significantly different maybe in terms of the science and what's there, but not different in terms of the hurdles and hardships that women have consistently faced in this country, specifically Black and brown women have faced and continue to face. Unfortunately, I think that she's going to experience the same thing. And again, I'm just looking for tools that I can, as a father, equip her with, expose her to, mentors I could connect her to, that is going to help her navigate far better than I can, again, because I don't have that lived experience as a woman.
I really appreciate your insight on that. Thank you. I mentioned Dr. Uri, and I want to share something that she wrote in an op-ed. It was some time ago where she was describing the challenge of being a woman in science in academic and corporate spaces. And here's what she wrote. Discrimination isn't a thunderbolt. It isn't an abrupt slap in the face. It's the slow drumbeat of being underappreciated, feeling uncomfortable, and encountering roadblocks along the path to success. These subtle distinctions help make women feel out of place. That's that, Tav, you're nodding about that. I mean, that is that belonging that has turned up in our conversation from the beginning. What would you say about that?
Yes, it's very real. And even, for someone at my level of full professor in physics, right? I still think about things such as dealing with imposter syndrome.
You do? I mean, you yourself?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. I mean, no matter what, like I said, we all have scars, right? And you do think about these things. I remember in my last role as chair of the department, I wanted to go and see Serena play. I'm a big old tennis fan. And I remember going, oh, but if I don't go and run this faculty meeting at this time, am I going to be looked at as less than, or, what's going to happen? I remember consciously saying to myself, what would my white male counterpart do?
Really?
And I pulled the trigger. And I said, I'm watching Serena play. And I got on that plane, my kid and I, and we went to New York and we went to the US Open. So, but, right, it's that, like you said, that conversation that you have with yourself as in asking, should you be in this space? Should you be doing these things? But the one thing that I do want to impress upon the audience to think about, these things we're living through, but this next generation, these next women scientists, they're going into those spaces and they're going to make changes, right? Because that's what we do here. We build women who lead and influence.
Peace,
and that's what we're doing.
Forgive me. Yeah. Peace, do you feel like you have the agency to do that kind of leading that Tav is talking about? I guess I'm asking again, is the change coming as fast as we would hope? What do you think?
While I was at St. Kate's, I did a lot of work with encouraging women of color to be in STEM or to help them along the way. I also worked with women, specifically also at St. Kate's. And being in those spaces, I was able to see more people that were in science and engineering interested in these topics. But now I'm in the corporate world and I'm the only Black woman at my job. I'm one of two. So it's hard to see the work that I was doing before, the work I've been seeing other people do, come to life quite yet. It's hard to believe that it's happening when I'm still the only person at my job. So I think we still need more time. There's still a lot of more work to be done, but the work is happening.
I've come over to stand behind a physician friend here who I know has strong opinions on things. How many men of your profession or in the scientific field do you think ask themselves the kind of question that Tav Hawkins asked herself, which is,
Well, I finished med school in 1991, and I think I have a message of hope because the field of medicine has changed dramatically, and it's been changed by women. And throughout my entire career, I've kind of seen it go from what truly was an old boys network into something completely different, really entirely transformed by women who basically said, like, I want to do this job, I can do this job, and I'm going to do it on my own terms. And I'm going to need a lot more than just a lactation room to do this. A lactation room is not the full deal. And I've gone from walking into a room with my supervising female physician who patients confuse her as my nurse. They refer to her as my nurse who's accompanying me. That is gone now. And so a word of encouragement, it's changing, and it can change a lot faster than you think, so stay on it.
Anita, some thoughts on that?
I think that's very inspiring. I think you've been asking us, is there a sense of urgency about increasing and diversifying the pipeline? And I would say, yes, there definitely is an urgency to that. I think Peace's example of really being the only and that extra push for more leadership and to the ability to influence really talks and speaks to that sense of urgency that we need to continue to diversify the pipeline for the workforce. But we're also facing really critical, serious issues in our world that require diverse perspectives and problem solving. We talked about healthcare, but when you think about climate change, when you think about political science and economic difficulties and insecurities, we need more diversity in thought. And so I'm hoping that it will change more quickly as we continue to really think about the importance of having a diverse pipeline and really tailor our experiences to continue to provide confidence for young women.
Tav, one of the things that you told me when we were talking in anticipation of the town hall was that the pipeline is leaky. What does that mean?
That there's many places along your path from transitioning from, sixth grade to middle school. When girls move from the front of the classroom to the back of the classroom by 12th grade.
Yeah.
They don't even sit in the front of the classroom when they get to college, when they're in co-ed classes. So there's many spaces along that path to the PhD or to just becoming a scientist, just finishing undergrad, that we could fall out of that path. And to really tell you, in science, it's very hard to lose step, to slip, and to finish, because then you're done. So there's a lot of pressure on staying steady on the course, on the path.
Wow. No room for a screw up. And in some ways, that's what college is about, right? That opportunity, and not just to screw up, but to explore. Wow. Peace, were you going to add something to that? Did you feel that pressure?
Yeah, and I still feel it now where I'm like, I feel like there's been a lot of steps to getting to, I guess, the end. And I feel like there's a lot of places where if I don't do this quite right, maybe I will end up not going the route that I'd like. And it's scary, I guess, sometimes. So.
I notice you taking notes. Hi. Are you a student?
Yes,
What are you majoring in?
biology.
What do you think about what you've heard?
I can relate to a lot of like the fears behind being like a woman of color in a field that is not full of people of color. So,
Does what our guests have told us about there really isn't room for a mistake? It's, just this idea that you may be singular in a lot of the spaces. That sound intimidating?
yeah, definitely. But I feel like that is definitely like a worry in the back of my head. But I also know that it can take longer to do the things that you want to do. But if you like put in enough effort, you can get there eventually. It might not happen like right now, but hopefully in the future.
What a group of wonderfully confident young women. Wow, this is really great. I'm looking for some other women who are out in the field in science, who are actually working in science. I thought I met a couple of you before we started. I just want to know if all right, I'm going back to the lady in the pink shirt. No, I'm going back to the Medtronic gal. Yeah. What do you think about what you've heard? Is a lot of this, you don't know it till you get there, and then you kind of have to figure it out pretty quickly without a lot of help?
Yeah, I'm kind of regretting not going to an all-women's school.
I was thinking the same as I was driving in tonight. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, shoot, but I'm already in a different one. Like sitting here talking about imposter syndrome. You were talking about it, and I was like, gosh dang it. I remember the first time I was told you don't look like a scientist. And boy, have I been trying to beat that high school teacher for better part of a decade. And so, it's absolutely wild. I was telling these folks next to me, for the last year is the first time I've ever worked on an all-female team. And I didn't really get the hype. Like, I just sort of was like, oh, they're kind of blowing smoke, like I can definitely make it in a man's world. I'm equally as tough as them. I can do everything they can do. And I work 10 times harder to do it, just to show that I can. And being on an all-women's team is great. It's fantastic. I'm never going back. And yeah, it's hard to be a woman in science. I'm a white woman in science, right? Like, I don't have every single additional piece to it, right? But gosh, I mean, I have been that person that's walked into a room and I had a guy next to me. He was my intern. I'd like to point that out. Did they think he was my intern? Absolutely not. They fully assumed I was his intern, right? And, you know, it's just kind of the way it is. I don't know. You learn, but it's not all butterflies and rainbows out there.
Did I hear that you had a science teacher who told you didn't look like a scientist? Oh my gosh. And you're young. What the heck? Who else has had that experience here? Had a science teacher. Oh, Peace, you did too? What? Tell the story. What happened?
I've had a couple of teachers tell me that I would not be successful in my field and kind of try to deter me from going into science or math.
Men or women?
Men.
And what was the reasoning? I mean, what was the argument that they were making?
Honestly, to this day, I don't fully understand why, because I was doing okay in the classes and I was understanding the content. It's just the only difference for me and the other students in the classes was that I was a Black female.
I mean, this is that thing again, Tav, about what a scientist looks like, all the cultural conditioning, and then people, I guess, who feel like it is their role to share that, you know, misguided perspective with students, which really does kind of blow my mind. What is that?
Arrogance.
Arrogance, yeah. What else? Gatekeeping?
To a certain degree, gatekeeping. But it really is arrogance. Just, I think I know who should be here. And they don't.
You sound like you want to say something else on that? Do.
Well, I just think that this generation, they're going to change this script. I really do. I am so hopeful with the future and what women will go in and how they will change the way we do science. I mean, from just feeling that ability to bring your whole self to work, you know, in your field, they are going to just sprinkle that like, I don't know, salt all over the place. Just making the environment much more welcoming, not just for women, not just for people of color, but even for men, right? Because it would be nice when you're a postdoc and you're in a lab and you don't feel like, oh, my experiment's not working, so I shouldn't go home. I should continue to keep working on this until I can get it to work. Well, I had a woman postdoc. And so a woman who had a kid that was a year younger than mine. And so it was refreshing just to have somebody that understood when my kid got sick, I couldn't come in, or I could bring my kid to the lab and work on my experiments far away from her, but still be close enough to get to her. That kind of thing is refreshing to know I could pack my kid up and go give a talk, and she would watch my kid in the back, right? My advisors watching my kid so I can give a talk.
Right.
Right? That just wasn't an option in the male-run labs that I was a part of. Like, I didn't feel comfortable asking for things like that, or even them just even knowing to offer it. So it was just different.
I'm back to, hi, I'm back to our guest who told me at the very beginning about that tension of balancing family life and science. So how do you manage that, and how do you create a culture within your lab that responds to that? Because that's part of the change I think our panel's talking about.
Yeah, I think that's really tough. I think it has to come with a lot of flexibility. I will say I've also had my kids in my lab pouring plates. My daughter was doing that a couple weeks ago before school started. I've had them as toddlers sitting on the bench next to me while I could finish experiments to get things done. Yeah, it's a really hard thing. So making environments where they can be flexible to do that is really helpful.
I mean, the challenge, what do you want to say what company you work for? Or?
St. Kate.
Oh, yeah. So you have a lab here, right. So the question is, can you deliver on everything you are supposed to deliver and still create an environment that is somewhat, responsive to, right, the needs of a different kind of working scientist?
I have to think so.
Anita, what would you say to that? I mean, that's the walking the talk, not just at St. Kate's, but out in the world, where the CEO may not care that you've got a sick kid and you have to get home. I mean, that's the hard work of changing the culture, right?
It is. It's a very challenging and demanding sort of process to really think about the trade-offs and the cost of more flexibility and sort of leeway for people. But I think that's one of I'm picking up on Tav's optimism about the next generation. I'm also trying to have some optimism about the workforce post-pandemic. We've learned that we can live more flexibly, that we can engage in different type of work and creative space so that there aren't that same level of challenges for women. I think it's just incumbent on us as a university and certainly the workforce to really think about how do we respect the work that needs to be done, but also promote resilience, promote wellness, health, and balance in all of the workers.
Mm-hmm. I think maybe we should talk about why this idea of diversity, creativity, I mean, why this is such an important ethic to bring into these spaces. I don't want to assume that everybody just has a good answer for this. There is a good answer for this, but let's assume that everybody can't articulate that. So Tav, maybe you'd speak to that. What happens when you bring more young women of color, more women into these spaces and confront a lot of the issues that the world confronts?
So I think that the one thing that diversity brings to the table is a different perspective in the way that we solve problems. Rather it be, something that you're working on at the bench to how is it that, you're gonna move forward in your career, right? These are all problem solving skills. And so you wanna look at, a different approach, something that someone would try just because they don't know any better, right? And so that perspective, right, that drive, that wanting to understand, to be able to solidify it into some sort of understanding, right, is gonna bring that to the table. And then they're gonna go, oh, I got this issue. Can you help me with this? And then she's gonna go, I don't know anything about physics, but let me tell you how I would look at that type of problem, right? It's just the people that are gonna be invited to the table it's just gonna be more and more perspectives. And so we need that for these real world type of problems that our society is facing now. We're not just working in silos, we're working across disciplines. And so we want people, who can not just talk about physics or chemistry. We want people that can cross over between the disciplines and approach those problems in a different way than what has been done before. Because, right, if we knew how to do it, we wouldn't have a problem. It'd be solved.
Right. I've come back here to the middle of the chapel. Would you introduce yourself and tell me a little bit about what you're thinking?
Hi, I'm Anupama Pasricha. I'm with the Fashion Design and Merchandising Department here at St. Gates. What I am thinking is not just for the science, but also for the arts, right? It's about women and women's work and how do they manage that in this situation where women are responsible for work at home and doing work at work. So they have this dual work. And that's how the society was built up, right? And when we created the systems of environment that's not flexible, it was keeping that man in mind, right? He's going to go to work, come back. So now we have to change that whole culture because we need that flexibility because now women are working and they are getting the same education. They are at par with men. So now we have to rethink how we have to build a structure on the system in the society where they can thrive because we can create those conditions that they can thrive there.
I have to say, I feel like we've been struggling with rebuilding that structure for a long time. I don't know how well that's going, but the work goes on. I was going to come down here to your faculty member, right? Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious about what you've been reflecting on when you've heard some of our audience and our panelists talk about this idea of belonging and mentoring and what that means for the way you show up for your students. Maybe you'll introduce yourself first.
Oh gosh, I was hoping I wouldn't get noticed. So I'm Rahul Roy. I'm a new biology faculty here, and my voice is quivering a little bit, but I'm going to try and articulate what I've been thinking. The first thing I'm thinking is I asked my wife to watch our daughter and put her to bed so that I could be here. Very aware of that. Yes. But I think one of the things I think for mentoring for me is very important, and the reason I chose St. Kate's is because I really believe that we need to stop that leaky pipeline. I have seen enough colleagues who have had to take care of a sick kid because their partner couldn't take the day off. Did they really try? Maybe. But that de facto pressure for my women colleagues to either take care of a sick kid or maternity leaves really affecting their ability to publish or something like that. So I've seen that, and I think the thing I really want to do is I want to make sure that I can mentor and talk about some of those things so that they're aware that this is an issue. And then the other thing I really want to do is just broadcast it to my circle so that other men who are not thinking about it are at least aware that you cannot just continue on like this. This is not fair. It really is not. And it really makes me angry. I mean, that's why I'm here. So, okay.
Thank you. Who else would speak to that? Boy, this is a shy group. I really have to walk up to people to get them to speak. So I'm coming over here to you. Would you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Beth Riedel-Carney, and I work at St. Kate's, and I work in the fundraising arena.
Okay. What do you think about what you're hearing on this issue of belonging and the pipeline and how many opportunities there are to lose that talent out of that pipeline?
I think it's actually really inspiring because we're naming it. We know what has to be done, and St. Kate's is helping make it happen. I think we're helping to grow the pipeline. We have to grow it more. But we've been doing this for years, and now we just have to make it bigger and include BIPOC persons and more. So I'm really excited.
Anita, what is the thing that stands, I guess, in contrast to some of this optimism? Yes, I'm coming to you for the pessimistic view. No, I'm not. I'm coming to you for kind of a reality check. I mean, as noted, there's been awareness, there's been resources, St. Kate's is on that path. What gets in the way of that?
That's a great question. I'm a little sad. I'm the pessimism person coming behind that, but I actually think we get in the way of that at times.
Okay.
And it
How
goes
so?
back to the sense of we provide a lot of access, and I think we try. But sometimes we're uncomfortable with stumbling into difficult dialogues, or sometimes we're uncomfortable with confronting and naming. I love what Beth said about we're naming it and we're trying to work on it. But sometimes I think we're uncomfortable with that. And so we let incidents go unattended, so to speak. Really being sensitive and thinking about the importance of diversity and equity and inclusion really means that we have to roll up our sleeves every day and endeavor in the hard work. And I think the commitment is there, but we really have to focus on keeping a level of activity so that our BIPOC students feel comfortable, that they know that they really do belong at St. Kate's, that we're really invested in their future, and that we really can't wait to see what they do when they go out and they lead and influence.
One of the things that you and I talked about was the idea of code switching and how necessary and just accepted that women will do it, women of color will do it. And again, that is a subtle kind of thing that is set in place in a structure of let's say, a company or an institution that people rarely talk about openly. But what we were talking about was really interesting. Is this something you find yourself doing? And is it something that you ever talk to the students about? And maybe you define it first, if you will.
I can define code switching, and it really is a linguistic term that really talks about the use of language and really shifting to fit and to speak and to fit in with the majority culture versus whatever your particular culture is. There's a lot of literature about code switching, and the more ability you do to have that, the more assimilated you appear, the easier it is to become accepted, but sometimes the less authentic you feel in your work and in your interactions. One of the things I like to do when I'm interacting with students is to speak their language. I also recognize that I'm old, and as soon as I say a word, it's going to be no longer feasible to say, and I have to learn the new one. But there is something about that sense of connecting, of being authentic, of using language in a way that helps you to feel like you're belonging. And so it's a challenge for a lot of BIPOC individuals who go through their day and code switch, and not just sometimes even in terms of language. It could be speech, it could be style of dress. I think we have a diverse menu in the cafeteria, but even sometimes what you're eating and that challenge of being accepted and fit in. So that's my long definition of code switching. I do think that it becomes challenging for students who feel like they can't be authentic or comfortable or in their own skin as they're pursuing their studies.
Right. So Peace, do you find yourself doing that in your professional world and maybe sometimes in your personal world?
Yeah, I definitely do. So in my professional world, since I'm still kind of new to my career, sometimes I'm still trying to find the right way to speak, I guess, with like my colleagues and like in meetings and things like that. And I find sometimes I catch myself maybe not code switching enough to feel comfortable. Maybe I say something how I normally would, but then I'm not getting the right response from people. And I'm like, maybe I should have spoken more in a different language, if you will, with these people, because I was too comfortable
Right.
in who I normally would be. I also code switch outside of my life. I didn't realize I did until recently. My fiance is a white man, and he pointed out to me, like, when you're with these people, you speak in this way. When you're with these people, you speak this way. And I was like, oh, I never noticed that I was doing that. But it's when I change the way I speak depending on how comfortable I am in a situation. Mm-hmm. And I guess I do that in all areas of my life.
Do you think it's required at your company?
I wouldn't say necessarily required, but I'd be very hesitant to not do so, if that makes sense.
Tell me why. Yeah.
I guess I don't want to. I want to be the best that I can be, so that I don't. Sorry, I don't know how to word this. I don't want to stand out. I don't want to point out more that I'm a different person than most people in the room. I want to be able to blend in so that I'm not standing out as, oh, this Black person speaks this way or this woman speaks this way. I don't want to be, I don't want to appear differently from my colleagues so that I'm not looked at differently and I'm taken seriously like everyone else is in the room, which can be tough sometimes.
Tav, I see you nodding at that.
Oh, I can understand that why she would feel a need to do that. I don't.
Did you say I don't?
Right.
It sounded like there was going to be more to that.
Yeah.
I don't.
Everybody's laughing because my students who are here, they know when I'm teaching a class, I'm just like I am right now. My faculty members, my colleagues know when I'm teaching talking to them. I'm the same way. And I feel that we as scientists need to make our science accessible to whoever we're talking to. If I'm talking to little kids on the playground, I want them to understand exactly what I'm saying, right? So I'm not code switching anymore, shall we say. It's like I want to be comfortable all the time, just like everybody else wants to be comfortable all the time. And I don't think it's a thing that people think, oh, well, she's not as intelligent because she doesn't use these terms. I remember learning and reviewing grants for NSF. And I remember a particular grant proposal that had a lot of jargon in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember having this discussion with my postdoc advisor. I said, I couldn't read any of this stuff. It was so jacked up. And she said, because it sucked. Right? And so you hide behind that language that makes it exclusive.
Mm-hmm.
We cannot do that. We have to meet people where they are, talk to them in everyday language, and get them to understand what we do as scientists. I told you, I'm on the playground. Little kids could tell you, when my kid was growing up, my kid was like, oh my God, here comes my mother again. They could tell you what research I do, because that's meeting them where they are, giving them just enough that they know what I do. And they go, oh, that's the woman. She looks at a microscope and she looks at these little things that wiggle, and somehow she could tell you how bendy they are. That's exactly what I do.
Yeah.
Right? And so I don't need to put up that wall that says this is what a scientist looks like. Because I want, that's what a scientist looks like. This is what a scientist looks like. That. Right? We're all scientists. And so why can't we celebrate that?
Boy, that is a great place to close our conversation. But I want to open this up for some questions. If anyone has questions of our panelists, or anybody has a story that you would like to tell, if you'll just raise your hand.
Hi, I'm Millie, and my question today was directed to Dr. Hawkins on the topic of code switching. Do you feel that you were code switching while becoming a scientist, and now you feel more confident because you are an accomplished scientist?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Definitely. I wanted to make sure that all of those doors that needed to be open for me to get here, to be sitting here right now, telling you what it was I did, were open. And so now I get to make the decision of how do I want people to see me, right? And I want you and everybody else out here to be comfortable and see me as approachable and see me as accomplished in my science, but still able to be talked to be questioned, to have a discussion, right? I'm not on a pedestal somewhere.
Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Karyana. I'm a current student at St. Kate's. And I prepared a lot of statistics, but I'm sure you guys are familiar with the work. I've read a lot of studies that say that STEM fields and related fields are becoming more diverse, more women, more people of color receiving degrees and just entering the field in general. And I wanted to know if you guys could reflect on what's driving the increase in diversity and what can the economics field learn from this?
Having more conversations like this. I think talking about it and making it something that's making people aware of the issue, that we don't have a lot of women, we don't have a lot of people of color in STEM, can help with this, improve the issue. Sorry.
So really being open about the challenge, the stories, right? The personal stories. I think those are powerful. To hear some members of our audience say in this day and age, their science teacher told them they didn't, Anita, what else? What would you say?
Well, I think we're also investing more in terms of mentoring programs and enhancing our experiences with undergraduate research so that students have the ability to really do that theory to practice. So it starts with really having these conversations, being committed to increasing and diversifying the pipeline, really working on our recruitment strategies, but really thinking about interventions to keep students and to help them to graduate.
Great question.
Good evening. I'm Kate Sang, and I'm an alum of St. Kate's from many years ago. And I just love to see how St. Kate's has changed since I was here many years ago. But my question is, so George Floyd was murdered in our backyard not too long ago. I'm curious, what happened? What's different at St. Kate's after our community has experienced that? Thanks.
Feel that a lot has happened. I think at the same time that the murder occurred, we were finalizing our inclusive excellence strategic plan. So we've always been committed to social justice. We've always been committed to equity, following in the Sisters of St. Joseph and promoting educational experiences for others. But we have the board endorse that plan. We've really been working on our recruitment and retention strategies for both faculty, students, and staff. We've been paying more attention to our curriculum, our co-curricular activities and experiences for students. We've been really looking at defining and outlining our leadership opportunities for students. And more importantly, I think the faculty and staff community has been much more committed to having these types of dialogues and engaging. We have a BIPOC faculty and staff affinity group that was developed. They were working towards the development, and then when George Floyd was murdered, we moved to establishing that more formally with a charter and then membership on our faculty senate. And then we have a group of white faculty who have started an anti-racism accountability group. It's over 100 faculty strong at this point. We're coming together for some dialogues, but we really have, I wouldn't say ramped up, but increased the opportunities that we have really to think about how are we thinking about defining social justice, looking at action, responsibility, but most importantly, taking care of our community.
So I'm a biology faculty member, and I have seen how this is the opposite of when someone tells you you can't do something. I've seen the power of the invitation to the student to, have you thought about graduate school? Have you thought about this program that we have for educating research in the aging field? Have you thought about this? I think you'd be wonderful. And I've seen how powerful that is. So maybe starting with you, Peace, did you have that invitation in your life as well that made a difference to you?
Yeah, for sure. I have actually a few people in this room that have asked me those very questions, especially in the math department, physics department. I had a lot of people encouraging me, okay, maybe you should apply for this scholarship. And I'd maybe have imposter syndrome about, well, maybe I'm not qualified for that. And they'd be like, well, you should give it a shot anyway. And I end up getting it. Things like that happened throughout my education here at St. Kate's and then also in high school. So.
I just really wanted to piggyback off of that because both of us are all three of us are students here, and we were specifically talking about how the invitational environment of St. Kate's is something we haven't experienced or is completely different. So I don't even know if Dr. Annalisa Jordan remembers this, but I can't, it's like a pivotal point for me. I came into college as a biology major, still pre-veterinary, and I was terrible at chemistry in high school, and my teacher, he was very intimidating and not very welcoming. And so after high school, I was like, I'm never touching chemistry again. And then I got into organic chemistry, and she specifically said to me one day during class, she was like, have you ever thought about being a chemistry major? If you like organic chemistry this much, you should think about being a chemistry major. And I was like, no, what do you mean? Everybody likes it this much. And she was like, no, they don't. You should really think about this. And I became a chemistry major. And I'm like, those are the types of conversations that all of our professors have with us all the time. And I'm like, I've never encountered that anywhere. So it's so special here at St. Kate's for that.
Dr. Jordan is sitting right over there, right? So, were you aware that you were making?
No. No idea. When it comes to encouraging students, it's not hard, right? We see your potential. Sorry, I just... Stop it. I think especially as a woman scientist, I see myself and my students. And the imposter syndrome is real, right? We find reasons to not belong. And I see that in my students. And I think of my scars and how our field is a field of failure, right? You fail and you learn and you try again, and you fail and you learn and you try again. And so helping my students discover that and let them know it's okay to be passionate about it and fail. And just helping them see that they do have that opportunity, that you can do it if you really want to. It's not hard.
Other questions?
Yeah, so I have a question. So I remember when I was looking at being a scientist, right? I always saw a scientist was a doctor, a PhD, something like that. And I mean, I don't really consider myself a scientist. I have a bachelor's degree. It's in genetics, that's what it's in. But like, I would not consider myself a scientist because I don't have an advanced degree. And I've noticed a lot of men are like, I'm a scientist. I have a bachelor's degree, I'm a scientist. And me over here is like, oh my God, like I am but an undergrad, like that's all I have. And so what would you kind of say in terms of how we do this in a scientific field, in terms of that imposter syndrome of just recognizing that, you don't have to go out and do like every additional academic achievement afterwards and still be a scientist?
Tav, maybe you'll tackle that.
Yeah. Remember that thing? What would my white male counterpart say? And just do it. Just own it. I mean, right? We are scientists intuitively. Little kids are scientists. Those are the best ones, right? They go out and collect a bunch of stuff, come home, look it up, ask you tons of questions about it. They are just scientists. I mean, it's just innate that we question. We want to study, we want to probe, we want to catalog. I mean, so you don't need a fancy title to be a scientist, right? Some of the best inventors never had a degree. I think about my grandfather, who was the son of a sharecropper, taking apart a car piece by piece because he didn't have the money to take it to a shop to get fixed, and he put it back together, right? Then he makes my dad, who's a mechanical engineer, and then somehow my daddy made me a physicist. He still don't understand it. I get a call weekly going, why are you doing physics? It doesn't pay. So, right? I mean, we all have family members that maybe didn't have the opportunity, but in their heart, like they really are, at their core, they are scientists. And so you don't need a fancy title. That doesn't make you a scientist. It's just that inquisitiveness, that wanting to know more, to study. Like I said, that's what makes you a scientist. So ask yourself, what would they say? And that's what you say.
Other questions? Okay, we have a reception to come to. I hope you'll all join us. But first, Beth, I want to say one other thing. I've lived and worked as a journalist in the Twin Cities for 30 years. I never knew really the story of St. Kate's. So until I had a conversation with Beth about what you're doing here, I really believe in this mission, and the story has to be told. So I'm grateful that all of you came here to help us tell the story, that we're going to get visibility for this, and that more people really ought to know what's going on here. So thank you very much for coming. It's good to have you here.
Thank you, Carrie. I think this evening was just fantastic. Thank you so much. And I have to thank our panelists. Amazing. Are we lucky or what? So I want to say, what was it? What would a white male do or say and do it? All right, I'm going to take that away tonight as our takeaway for all of us. So just pretend I'm a white male, and I am going to thank you all for being here tonight. St. Kate's has a 116-year history of educating women to lead and influence. Many of our alumni are here tonight. I hope you all are living deeply and proudly into that tradition. And I want to have a special thanks to all of the students who spoke tonight. Your courage, your tenacity, amazing. Really amazing. If you don't leave this chapel tonight filled with hope, we should talk, because there was a lot to be hopeful about tonight. And, there's a saying that I love: hope about the future and confidence in our ability to influence it are both fundamental to philanthropy. And I think that's really true. And one of the things we wanted to tell you tonight is we are just in the middle of our campaign, the next level of excellence. And right now our primary focus is on the Mendel Renovation Project. And we have coined that and named that Expanding Horizons. And I think after being here tonight, you understand why that matters, and why the Expanding Horizons is our work, our shared work. We certainly have the leadership to do it. We have the talent and the students to do it. And I'm hoping that you all recruit more and more young women to think about St. Catherine's, think about life in the sciences. And if you could, please consider making a gift in support of the campaign. There is a QRL code on the back of your program, some of the interesting facts that we hope inspire you to think about partnering with us, because together we can deliver the tomorrow we all want and we all deserve, and our students so richly deserve. Thank you for this evening. And please join us by exiting this door, walking across an inside bridge to Durham Hall, our first building on campus. And there are refreshments and a chance to gather with the students and the presenters. Again, thank you.